Good afternoon. This is Thomas Grant, and this is the little video I'm going to post for the confidential page concerning the author and the Moody Massacre. The reason I'm making a video is I thought it would be easier to tell the story verbally versus trying to, do it writing-wise. And maybe it's easier to communicate what I'm thinking through video versus typing it out anyway. So earlier this week, I think Monday, I posted about the first issue I found with the author and what was being talked about in the book, and that was over the domestic violence advocate talking to Scott Moody's mother, Sherry Kay, prior to the murders, and how it was presented in a podcast that actually never happened, and then come to find out, it did happen. And I was very curious why the misrepresentation to these podcast hosts. Now, after that happened, I obviously had questions and concerns about the truthfulness of the book and how much of it was questionable or downright inaccurate. Now, we had established that the author became intertwined in this story because he was initially hired to defend the estate of Scott Moody against possible lawsuits from victims. Those lawsuits never did materialize because of some clerical problems, and that's why the lawsuits never was pursued. I don't know exactly what the clerical or paperwork problems were, but needless to say, there was never any lawsuit brought against the estate of Scott Moody. I've had a victim's family say they were not actually going to sue Scott for wrongful death. It was just the fact that the death occurred on that property, and that was the premise behind the lawsuit. But either way, that's how the author got initially started in this story. So I was looking at the book and I thought, I did a podcast episode highlighting this story, and that story was the gray-haired man. And if you've read the book, they say that there is a neighbor who lived in the house beside the grandparents, the Schaefer family. He was a renter, and he saw a car pull into the driveway of the Schaefers the morning of the murders. And in the book it says 2 people were in the car, and this witness stated a gray-haired man wearing only a t-shirt got out of the car and walked around to the back side of the Schaefer home. And another older gentleman went to the door to knock on the door. And shortly thereafter, the car left with only one passenger, the old man who knocked on the door. The gray-haired man, who was wearing only a t-shirt, was not in the car. And this was obviously a big deal because it introduced this mysterious gray-haired man to the crime scene prior to the murders. Big deal. And I made a big deal about this in one of my posts originally in the podcast when I started doing the podcast. This was a big deal. Why was this not looked into by the sheriff's department? Here's your murderer. I mean, I really made a big deal out of it. And after I put that information out, the son of the neighbor reached out to me. I don't have the name offhand anymore. That Facebook page was deleted, so I don't have that to reference back to. But the son reached out to me, and number one told me that his father had unfortunately passed away. But he said that he was there the morning of the murders, And he was actually there and present when his father spoke to law enforcement and gave his statement. And the first thing that the son told me was, my dad did not see two people. He saw one person, and that was it. There was never a gray-haired man that he ever witnessed get out of the car that morning. And he said the person that he witnessed was an older person, and after the funeral, his father was certain that this person was at the funeral. He believes it was possibly a family member of the Schaefers of some sort, but he did not know. But he knew the person looked familiar, and after the funeral, he thought for sure that the person was there that he saw who stopped at the Schaefers the morning of the murders, prior to the murders. So that's a big deal. So then I actually finally got a hold of some records, and I got the statement from this gentleman. And I read the statement, and the statement said the same thing that the son told me, that this guy did not see a gray-haired man get out of the car. That just didn't happen. So here's the second part, right? I mean, this is another point where something that is extremely important to the telling of the story of the book is not true. It's not even half true. Like, there was never a gray-haired man seen by anyone prior to the murders. And again, if you read the book, this is a very important factor in the book. So then I had two different instances where what was being told and what the reality was completely different. And at this point, I had already kind of lost communication with the author. After I learned about the discrepancies with the domestic violence advocate, I had asked the author if he had ever questioned Kurt Frazier. I said, did you ever, reach out to him for comment to get his side of the story at all? And the author said, no, of course not. And I said, well, I'm trying to do that. And I remember he replied to me, oh, wow, you're actually trying to do this the right way. And I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? So I found it very alarming that he did not even try to reach out to Mr. Frazier, who was his, in the book you can tell that was his gray-haired man. The fixer was Kurt Frazier. Now, I'm not saying Kurt is or is not a fixer or whatever, but the fact that this author did not, at the very minimum, reach out to this man and say, hey, you deserve the platform to give your side of this story if I'm going to paint you as this big bad wolf, right? So that was a red flag to me as well. Like, well, yeah, I'm going to reach out and talk to this guy. He deserves to be heard, right? And I remember when I told the author this, the author told me, make sure you don't go to his house, because if you do, you may not make it home alive. And I thought that was, maybe like a middle school way of trying to manipulate me. I figured a guy as old as the author would have had a better approach at trying to manipulate someone. And yes, I'm being facetious, but I thought, come on, stop. And I'm still alive, so his theory of anyone going to this person's house to talk to him would end up dead was proven wrong 100%. But so that was the other issue that I had. And in the book, it also covered, I think it said the Attorney General had a deputy sheriff down here from a different county. And this deputy sheriff had, his tires were flattened, I believe. There was a bullet left, like, on the hood of his, on his car, I believe. And very nefarious things were happening to this deputy sheriff from a different county. I believe he told me Ottawa County, but I could be mistaken. Whatever county it was, I looked into that county. I looked into that sheriff's department. and asked for anyone to help me, confirm these reports. And I got nothing back. I got responses back from the sheriff's department in the county that the author told me this deputy worked. But the responses I got was absolutely, denying that any of those things happened. Like 100%. This person, there was not a deputy sheriff down here from a different county getting blatant threats of his safety by members of local law enforcement in Logan County. So again, there was another part of the book that was just completely fabricated. Wasn't even based on truth at all. From everything I was able to understand through doing my own research. Those right to me, those three issues right there highlight the misconception that this book is based on fact, which again is something that the author told me directly. This book is 100% fact-based. And I remember he made a comment like, everything can be proven with proof and evidence. But I'm learning through this process that that's not true. And it's concerning because so many read this book and continue to read this book with the understanding or the presumption that the book is 100% verifiable, 100% fact. And I'm here to say, through my own personal independent research and experience with this book, with the author, and with the facts of the case, it does not bear out that the book is based 100% on fact. There's a lot of fiction involved in the story, obviously. I mean, it's a fictional book. And the hard part when you have a fictional book talking about non-fictional events, meaning real-world events, it creates a lot of gray area. So that's the problem. Because some people read this book and say, this is exactly what happened. And I'm here to say, no, it's not. I know that because I've researched it. So that's why we need to get the investigation files. That's why we need to get the autopsy reports and crime scene photographs and everything that we can get our hands on legally, so we can look at the facts and stop talking about rumors. Because that is the biggest roadblock to the truth, is unfounded rumors somehow finding their way into the official story. So that's where we're at, and that's how I got to where I got when it came to not believing the book as a reliable source. All right, we will talk again later. Thank you, and please have a good evening.